era. So you are, if you're an attendee on this call, you can ask questions. There'll be a question and answer session after Willa and her team will present on the strategy report that they created. And you'll be invited to ask questions. There's a raise hand button on the bottom of your screen. You can also type questions or comments at any time into the chat feature. And we just ask that as you are commenting or speaking on this topic, we talk respectfully to each other. That's just a expectation, normal way of conversing respectfully with each other, so we can have good input into the report, because that's why we're holding this meeting. The public process is a really vital part of strengthening the draft report, making sure it reflects the context and perspective of the members of the community. Housing's a critical community feature, community support, community fabric, and we can't talk about housing, understand housing, or improve housing without reflecting all of your perspectives. And so the public process is just a key element, and to get your perspective and have your input, we need to have that conversation as respectfully and civilly as possible. So with that said, I will hand that over to Willa, who will facilitate the evening from here.
Wonderful. Thank you, Amy. And thank you all for being with us tonight and taking some of your precious time to think and discuss community housing in Clear Creek. We're really looking forward to sharing the work we've done so far and hearing from you about if we're on the right track and how we can improve this report. So I'll just briefly introduce myself, and we'll have an opportunity for the other panelists to do so as well. I work on workforce and affordable housing all across Colorado and the Mountain West, and it is a vexing and wicked problem. You're a community that's not alone in it at all. And I think that the exciting space is what we're doing right now, where we're really focusing on solutions and how can we chart our course to remain and continue to grow as the type of community we want to be. So I actually live down in the Gunnison Valley in Crested Butte, and we've been grappling with these housing issues for a long time here, and they've gotten a lot worse in the past couple of years. And so it kind of takes everyone coming to the table and putting their best foot forward to create solutions. So that's why I love the work, and I'm excited to hear from you tonight. And I will pass the baton to my colleague Shannon, who will also be presenting some of the information this evening.
Thanks, Willa. I'm Shannon Cox-Baker with Rivet Development Partners, part of the consultant team with Willa. And similar to Willa, I've been working in the affordable housing space in Colorado for over a decade as a consultant and also as a developer. I actually had the good fortune of working on the Riverbend Residences development, consulting to the owner of that property in Idaho Springs. And so it was nice getting to work again with the county and looking at opportunities both within and outside of Idaho Springs. It's sort of really trying to see what the future landscape might look like for housing, how the needs have changed, how they might still very much be the same. And so happy to be here and really looking forward to feedback from those who are participating.
Matt, you want to go next?
Hi, everybody. Good evening. Thank you for being here. My name is Matt Lynn. I'm with Project BOCC. We're another consulting partner on this project. I've been involved in doing a lot of the research and interviewing, particularly around exploring mobile home park strategies for the county. And so just excited to hear your feedback this evening.
Thank you. Let's go to Sally with Clear Creek County now. You're on mute, Sally.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sally Rush, and I'm the Clear Creek County Housing Coordinator. And I'm glad to see some participants on the call. Thank you.
Excellent.
And go ahead, Willa.
Oh, I was going to say, how about our elected officials now? Randy, will you begin?
Sure, glad to. Randy Wheelock, Clear Creek County Commissioner, long career in housing, but not affordable housing, and am here to listen to input from everyone who attends this evening who's willing to give that input. Really looking forward to hearing it and learning from it.
Thank you. How about George?
Yeah, hi, George Marlin, County Commissioner from the district that includes Idaho Springs. Housing is a complicated issue that affects all of us in one way or another. So I'm really excited and grateful for the folks who decided to take some time to help advance our thinking on this. I think the one thing that I would hope we all can agree on is that a future where folks who work here can live here and folks who live here have good jobs here is something that we all would like to see and achieve. And there's lots of different approaches to get there. So thank you.
Wonderful. Our County Administrator, Brian.
Yes, good evening. Brian Bossart, I'm the county manager. I liked Willa's phrase. It's a wicked problem. I think we all agree that it is. It's how do we agree on what our next steps are. And so like everyone else on the panel, looking forward to hearing the thoughts of the community.
Thank you. And last but not least, Nevin, who is helping to run the technology of this meeting. Nevin, will you introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Nevin Mandel. I work for Clear Creek County and am a Best and Brightest Fellowship Fellow, as well as I work as a Community Engagement and Strategic Planning Fellow. So really glad to be a part of tonight's work.
Thank you all. So I will jump into our slides, and this will be a brief presentation. Obviously, the emphasis is hearing from you all, but we wanted to make sure that everyone had an orientation in the report if you've not yet read it. It is available on the Clear Creek County Forum page, as well as there's questions and opportunities to engage there. So our agenda for this evening is here. We've already done our kickoff and introductions. So now I'll be sharing the overview of the work. Then we'll have plenty of time to gather your questions and feedback. And I actually reversed the order of these. We'll be doing the next steps before the open forum, just in case we run out of time if there's a lot of comments. So I want to make sure you had that under your belts before we get into the public discussion. So as Amy mentioned, we have two central questions in this report. How do we move from understanding our housing needs to addressing them? And what is the county's role in that process? And I think we're clear, you know, as we've been through the research that, well, actually, I won't jump ahead. Let me start with what we've done so far. So we began with a baseline of a very comprehensive needs assessment done in 2018. And that documents very well what the gaps, the challenges, sort of why a housing problem exists. And it proposes quite a few solutions that are pretty on point, but they're also perhaps they're also far from kind of where we are today. So this list is just, it needed to be narrowed down and prioritized and sort of met with the desires and capacity of Clear Creek County as a community. And then there's some things that can be second and third tiers that you grow into later out of this report if you desire. So to ground ourselves in what exists in the county, what's working well, and start to form our recommendations, we did an extensive list of stakeholder interviews, employer focus group that was very informative around employers' struggles, which have really become much more acute in the post-pandemic era, as there's just so much pressure on growth in Colorado, and particularly in Colorado mountain communities where we have our housing inventory is very limited, and people are just seeking to be in these beautiful and more remote locations. So we did a day-long site visit, and that was really excellent, particularly around the work that Shannon will present around what are the opportunity sites and constraints. And it was a great opportunity to immerse ourselves and hear from many local leaders, as well as just when you're dealing with housing and real estate, just being on site and understanding the context was very, very helpful. And then throughout, we've been working with the steering committee, but as you know, as we were presenting priority action items and recommendations, they gave us a lot of feedback and refinement around those. And then we brought our draft report to the steering committee and the commissioners before making it available to you all, the public. Since it's been available to the public, we've also done 2 stakeholder engagement meetings that were connecting back with those people we interviewed, saw at the site visit, or who have otherwise really been engaged with housing up to now. So that, so we've heard their feedback, but it is not incorporated yet because we're going to hear from you and hear, kind of have this open comment period before we start doing additional changes. We want to have a really comprehensive understanding of the feedback. So what we anticipate now is that all this feedback will coalesce into making probably quite significant changes to the existing draft report. And that will be brought back to the steering committee and the BOCC in the new year. So in terms of our recommendations about addressing solutions, we felt like there were 3 real focus areas to work on. And those particularly hinged around land use plans and infrastructure. Where do we want to grow and where do we want to maintain sort of stability and you know, truly rural character? Our recommendation is that most growth and what's going to work best for trying to serve people who are truly living and working in your community, and sort of, we're not focused on the second homeowner population, we're not focused on the remote worker population, is going to be adjacent to existing water, sewer, school, grocery store, community services of a variety of kinds. And also obviously with your strong I-70 transportation corridor, close to transportation, be it your circulator bus or the interstate. So so ensuring that we're actually really focused around where we make infrastructure investments and that all our planning documents align around agreement about where to like sort of more intense development should happen, and where we maintain that sense of natural beauty that's so important in Clear Creek County. Then,
Hey, Willa,
yes.
we just got a comment in the chat that at least one person was having a little trouble hearing and understanding you.
Oh dear, okay. Let me get a little closer to the mic, as well as turn it up. So continuing on then, in terms of prioritizing housing for local employees and residents as on appropriate public land. So being very clear in the inventory of land that we have that that is the desired use, and then proceeding with the steps to make that feasible and to partner on it. And then finally, preserving and improving the housing that we have, because this is so vital as the existing housing inventory is aging and has increasing challenges around livability and energy efficiency and so forth. If we're losing housing at the same time that we're trying to create new, we're just treading water. So we need to invest in and improve the existing inventory simultaneous with these efforts around where can we grow to meet the growing demand. Is that better on comprehension and volume? Okay. So that's the high level of what are the actions we were recommending. And then in terms of what is the county's role, our primary recommendation is that the county support creating a multi-jurisdictional housing authority that all the municipalities all in the county can participate in, as well as potentially nonprofits, employers, et cetera, so that this is truly a community organization that has broad representation, and it is it's collectively done rather than every jurisdiction trying to grow the expertise to do housing. We think this would be much more efficient. It would also ensure regional coordination in terms of like markets and grant dollars and loans and all the things that sort of need to go into any given housing initiative being successful. And then the other thing that is beneficial here is that for the people of the community, it creates more of a one-stop shop, and you don't have to sort of know oh, there's this little thing going on there and that little thing over there, and navigate all of that. So so that would also, we see, very much complement the work of existing entities like Habitat for Humanity and the Northwest COG and others that are playing in this space and doing really, really good work. So this would fill in some of the gaps that they're not addressing. We had some additional recommendations just to keep in the forefront as we're implementing all of these things. One of them is that public-private partnerships are really, really important. The public sector is not going to be able to pull off solving this wicked problem by itself, nor has the private sector been able to rise to that challenge over the many decades. So together, bringing the expertise of the two, and I see this in all the places I work, that is absolutely vital, and figuring out those swim lanes and who's doing what, so that you can actually get something tangible done. We, as Matt mentioned in his introduction, we took a deep dive on mobile homes and what strategies could be implemented there. That was a theme consistent from the old needs assessment and into this work and all of our interviews. So we want to make sure that that continued to be elevated. And then education and engagement across the sectors and the communities. This is another thing that we see this, this regional housing entity being really helpful with. And that is that that we're not always speaking with the same language or the same understanding about what it means to create housing that serves people who live and work and have put down roots or are struggling in Clear Creek. So I realized I kind of jumped over one thing, which was about this kind of fancy word, multi-jurisdictional housing authority. So first of all, I don't like anything about that phrase in terms of it's just so jargony, and what's a housing authority anyway? So this would be, it's a quasi-governmental entity. It has certain awesome superpowers that help it do the work of creating community housing. And it's something that a lot of other counties and communities around Colorado have pursued, just for the very reason that I described. So it would be the different jurisdictions, the towns and cities and the county could all participate in it, and they would help to govern it and give, a director and maybe over time there'd be one or two staff people direction to do the work. And so everyone, all the jurisdictions have a vote, all the jurisdictions participate in the funding, and they also help to draw in resources from outside of the county to fund the operations of the entity and to help get the work, fund the things that need to be done. So that is a little bit more about like that fancy phrase. So at this point, I would like to hand it over to Shannon, and she's going to give you a quick rundown on the development opportunity sites.
Yeah, thanks, Willa. And so as Willa mentioned at the top of the presentation, part of our charge was to really, try and focus on this whole concept of implementation. What would it take? What are the next steps here? Let's put aside the question as to whether or not a housing, strategy is needed, or whether there's true demand for housing, or people in the community are currently housing constrained. Let's start from the premise that we've answered that question, and let's look at some sites and really see if there's a methodology for trying to prioritize sites. And so the evaluation criteria, which Willa has described and is also listed here on the slide, is pretty straightforward. I think probably fairly intuitive. Just to kind of dig into it a little bit deeper, for those of us, myself included, who work almost exclusively in affordable housing, these evaluation criteria are threshold criteria for securing funding to develop affordable housing. So, that's a whole other presentation into itself in terms of how that's done, but it's not discretionary, really finding a site that is owned by an entity that's obviously a willing seller, that can be favorable on terms, identifying sites that are appropriately zoned for the proposed use, that don't need rezoned, that don't have a long protracted, entitlement process that can support density of, typically what we're talking about for multifamily housing is 30, 40 units at a minimum, if you're really talking true multifamily housing. And so we're looking at each of these sites, and I'm going to go through kind of through those lenses, as well as the other two, utility access and proximity to amenities. Again, this isn't a comprehensive evaluation. This is really just a starting point. We're just focused here on publicly owned sites. So we did not look at any privately owned property, although certainly there are willing sellers out there in the county that probably hopefully are on this call, might even want to comment on their sort of view of development potential in the county and how the county could play a role in helping to facilitate development. But again, this is just a starting point, and obviously further due diligence would be warranted. But just to jump right in, so the former LDS Church property at 445 West Dumont Road, we visited all these sites in person, and this site obviously has a really strong rural character. It's a beautiful property, but it really is a bit hindered by its access or ability to access water and sewer. And there really aren't any true supporting amenities, in close proximity to the site. And by that, I mean like schools and grocery stores and, convenience retail, that type of thing. The fact that there's an existing building, an existing structure on the property, and it was in operation for quite a while, I think is certainly a strength. And it's also further evidence that the site would be not a low in terms of development readiness. We gave it a medium, primarily because a RFP was issued for this property, and there was interest. There were a handful of developers who did respond to that with proposals. So again, as far as this property goes, we really were thinking of it in terms of a high, medium, low, that this one was more scoring as a medium. Again, mostly because of that limited access to amenities and the lack of municipal water and sewer. The Bakerville site, which again, apologies, it's not really shown clearly here on the map, but it is in the report. So if folks are unfamiliar with where what site we're referencing, I'd encourage you to look at it in the report. This site sits along Clear Creek, and its potential probably at this point, and again, in our high level estimation, was more of like a seasonal campground, potentially for seasonal workers. The absence of utilities here, and again, its lack of proximity to amenities, and the cost prohibitiveness associated with developing it is why we gave it a low ranking. The next slide, Willa, or whoever's controlling. Thank you. The Mill site and the Argentine Street sites are both in Georgetown. Again, visiting both of these, the Mill site is the one that we gave one of two here that we gave a high ranking. These are pad ready development sites, and they're adjacent to townhomes that have already been developed, that are currently occupied. These sites have a very high potential, I think in large part because of the fact that the community, I apologize, I don't know if it was the town of Georgetown or the county, has already done quite a bit of initial due diligence on these sites. There's been title work, survey, some engineering cost estimates. So it's probably well primed for a public RFP process to bring in a developer to do whatever is identified as the highest and best use, if that's for sale housing or rental housing, affordable housing, workforce housing, market rate housing, whatever is ultimately determined to be the target population. Now, the Argentine Street site, truly undeveloped site, but its proximity to the Bighorn Crossing and the Mountain Creek townhome developments are a real asset. Both of those properties have incredibly low vacancy rates. So that is, I think, already a strong indicator that there's demand for more rental housing in this market. The site's adjacent to the Family Dollar store, and it borders Clear Creek, both obviously really great amenities. And so we would encourage the county to really invest some time, energy, and money into some initial due diligence to really assess the site's potential for development and a bit more depth. Okay,
would
so
just that Georgetown as well, since it's their site.
yeah, thanks, Willa. The school district property and Digger Field, both of which we visited and are in Idaho Springs, great properties. I'll just jump ahead. Not too much to say about the Digger Field site. It obviously has high development potential. It's already being proposed for a higher density mixed use development. So I think repurposing this site into much needed housing, obviously the markets, identifies with that need, and it's, without any real initial push from the county, that site's already on a track, we believe, to be under development. The school district property, so we're talking specifically about the running track that's adjacent to the school. Again, really, I think somewhere between that high and medium in terms of development readiness. It's a flat site. It's got great access to downtown Idaho Springs. Those are both huge pluses for that property. What we don't know is some of, again, stuff that could be determined through some initial due diligence about the cost to extend utilities or improve road access for fire. But again, I think the adjacency to a school, which is our understanding will be sometime in the near future repurposed, reoccupied as a school, is really encouraging, and could potentially open up opportunities to prioritize this site for housing for school district employees or teachers, which would be a real true community benefit. And then last slide. So we did again visit Silver Plume. No specific sites were looked at here, but our understanding is that the town does have both water and sewer access, which are obviously strengths for any property owners, private property owners who would be looking to sell their properties and leverage that. However, given sort of the small scale and the historic nature of the town, it doesn't, in our estimation, feel like it would attract a tremendous amount of investor interest to do something of a medium or higher density scale. And that's probably appropriate given given the character of the town. So those were the sites we looked at. Again, just want to reiterate, that's just a very, very 30,000 foot high level overview, acknowledging that the county has limited resources into where they would want to maybe put time and energy and dollars into prioritizing sites. So again, I think additional public input on these sites and potentially on other sites that we were remiss in reviewing would be helpful as well.
Awesome, thank you, Shannon. And so before I move off this topic and into the next steps, I wanted to just mention and reiterate that privately owned sites also have tremendous potential for being part of the solution here. And they're just, it wasn't the scope of this report to delve into those, but we would, we very much like those to be sort of blended and braided with public sites going forward, because that is often where the really important work can happen. And then the other thing is that, we didn't touch on any sites in Empire, and we did spend a lot of time in Empire on our site visit, and I really appreciate the work that's been occurring there and the fact that it is a part of the community that really could be part of the housing solution, I think, in an important way. And really why there is that sort of omission is that there wasn't a publicly owned site that was flagged as having housing potential, but I still think that there's work to do around, well, how do we bring that to fruition? Is there a land bank effort that needs to happen? Are there private sites that could move forward? Because I think that Empire is very much in the mix and an important part of the solution. So and the other thing I guess I'd say is that, I think both Shannon and my estimation, there are sites that are pretty ready to go, and we can get into the actions of these sites, but there wasn't like really low hanging fruit. And so the work that's happened to date in the county, and it's it's really on track. And it's just that, you know, these sites aren't necessarily super straightforward and like just add water. But they can be done, and there's good sites. So, so just in terms of kind of briefing you on the next steps, as I mentioned at the beginning of the slideshow, we're in this open comment period. We ask that you submit your submit comments by December 17th. So if you want to take some time on the forum or email Sally Rush or what have you, we'll collect those all together, really evaluate what are the important, you know, what are the themes that are emerging, correct errors in the report, and then add and change potentially the strategies based on what we've been hearing. We anticipate bringing that back to the steering committee and the Board of County Commissioners in the like January, February timeframe. And then, you know, if that is well received, the county can move into the action steps and, you know, kind of going on a roadshow around how we're going to organize the work and starting to do some of the implementation of the strategies. So that is, that's where we're headed. And we would love now to open the public comment. We have a series of questions for you. So we wanted to start with just, should the county do what the report recommends to preserve and improve housing in the community?
And I do see Mary Jane has her hand up to talk, so I'll go ahead and let her do that first.
Wonderful. Yeah. And Nevin, if you can just be the facilitator of those in and out of the analyst room. Now.
And Mary Jane, you should be unmuted. You can talk now.
Okay. This is Mary Jane Lovely. I own, I'm one of the owners of the Argo Mill site, and we're currently zoned and entitled to do 120 housing units. And of course, we're obviously willing to do a public-private partnership, but to me, it seems not the right thing to do to include only publicly owned land in this study when we have multiple places in this community that have been entitled and zoned and would love to partner with people. The other one that I would mention, and housing is a big part of our Argo development. The other one that I would mention is you're looking at the track at the school, but we did and the county paid for it, a Clear Creek Economic Development Study back 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago, and got permission from all of the private owners adjacent to the school to include them in the planning study for the feasibility for housing and hotel. So that turned out to be a 77-acre site for not only affordable workforce housing, but market rate housing, all kinds of various multi-purpose uses, including the school. But there's 77 acres around exit 240 that all of the property owners have said they want to play. And so I think it's a mistake if this study doesn't look at that. And the city of Idaho Springs is actually looking at a exit 240 planning area study. So that is, if you haven't read the exit 240 economic feasibility and the market feasibility study, those are two key pieces that could be huge, especially since the 4 Points development is going to be happening on Digger Field. The other thing, I don't know if anyone talked to, the city of Idaho Springs has identified all of their publicly owned sites and are talking about putting housing on 4 or 5 of those. So did anybody interview the city as to what sites they might be willing to work on? Let me see, I have another, and then the 2800 Minor Street property, where the owner really is trying to redevelop the trailer park into housing, rental housing, as well as some for sale housing. So if no one's talked to him, he's on the docket. And then Kevin O'Malley's Soda Creek Highlands, I think, even though that may end up being higher level housing. These are all private developers that could potentially be public-private partners that I think it would behoove the county to take a look at. So that's my 2 cents.
Wonderful. Thank you for chiming in. And we're taking super detailed notes. So we will follow up on these recommendations.
And I do have all of that information.
Awesome. Thank you. The Exit 240 study just came across my desk yesterday. So that is really great to know, and a significant piece that we missed in the rough draft. So let's, who's next, Nevin?
Yeah, so next we have Jason. Jason, if you're currently muted, but once you're unmuted, you should be able to talk.
Thank you so much. First of all, I just wanted to say thanks to everybody who's putting effort into creating this this draft and running through the entire process. My only regret to date is that I haven't been actively involved with helping and giving feedback. I just recently found out about the initiative, and I'm just delighted that everybody's putting effort into it. The comments that I have today are really high level in terms of the draft, and I really appreciate the urgency that the committee is taking to provide some short-term relief, and a lot of the tactical recommendations I'm actually not going to comment on, but I also don't want to derail any of those activities. What I'm really interested in is kind of some of the bigger picture pieces. I want to give feedback on the strategy side. So the first thing that I would like to understand is kind of what is the mission within the executive summary. We can kind of suss out what we think is really important as a reader, but it's not clear. Themes that I pick up on are that local and lifelong residents should be able to keep living in Clear Creek. And if that's something that we believe in, I'd love to see that kind of clearly stated. And in line with that mission side of the house, what are then the overall goals for the development we're trying to achieve? Things that I'm hearing in this meeting today are a lot about how do we really increase the supply side of this problem, more housing, more affordable housing, and quicker. What does that mean for the vision then of what Clear Creek County is? Are we aspiring as a community to have high density communities that have easy access to the mountains, or do we like the density as today? And I don't have an opinion either way in it, but I think it's really important that as we go forward, we agree kind of what that end goal is. We can throw in 120 housing units here or 200 here, but that will change the feel for the community of folks who've lived here their whole lives. So again, I don't have an opinion, but I think that would be something I'd love to know kind of more what the community wants so that it can guide the decisions that this group is making. Second, I mentioned this earlier, it's a very supply side approach, and I did see some on the building costs in here. Well, like what are the things that we can do on the building side to lower the cost? And what I'm not seeing is kind of what are we doing on the demand side? Do we understand the dynamics that are leading to the problems that we have? I'm not going to say that it's simple to understand, but some of the big drivers are, right? We have generally lower wages in these rural communities, and have stagnated probably for the last 20 years. So that's part of the problem. Another part of the problem is that we're right next to a major metropolitan area where a software developer can earn, $250,000 a year. And because we're 45 minutes away, it's easy to have a second home, right? We have the corporate ownership of housing problem, where companies like Zillow and others are buying houses to do the fix and flip piece and driving up costs. We, of course, have the complex issue of vacation rentals. So I'd like to see kind of more development on how do we address some of those demand side problems, and really, some of the greatest policy tools government has, I think could solve and help tune this solution, right? For example, tax rates different for second homes, residential tax breaks, I appreciate that we want to have lots and lots of rentals, but is that the dream we want for Clear Creek? I think, you know, it would be an aspirational vision to be able to not just be able to pay your rent every month, but to own a home and be a member of the community. And again, that kind of goes back to that mission side of the house. So I'd love to see more thought on that demand side of the house. And then two final comments. I don't want to abuse my time, but you know, one of the pieces that's in here is I know we keep focusing, and the language in here is on employee housing, and we're focusing on kind of the worker as an asset. And I think that really, I'd like to make sure that we're being conscious that we're residents of Clear Creek. And yes, we have jobs, and that's how we pay for our housing, but we're not the resource. We're here to live and to have an enjoyable life. And you know, Colorado has a rich labor history, and I'd like to avoid us being in a situation where employers are building and providing housing, and these harken back to the ideas of the company store that our forefathers fought really hard against. So I think I'm going to stop there. I guess my last request is if you're passionate about this issue and you'd like to get more directly involved with some of the solutioning beyond maybe some of the immediate tactical pieces as an active member of the community, what's the best way to do that? And I think that's probably my direct question is if I'd like to roll up my sleeves and help give more feedback, how would I go about doing that? And thank you for your time.
Thank you. I really appreciate those comments and recommendations. And I think there's a lot there that we can address around, you know, the language and how we're talking about housing, because we're grappling with that piece of sort of describing. It's almost easier to say what it's not, you know, it's than what it is sometimes. And I think that we, you know, the dynamics of what's leading to the problem are well described in that needs assessment, which is why we focus this more on the solutions. But I think that there's, your point is really well taken there. So let's, and obviously I won't take up addressing each point now, but we've heard you, and let's go to the next person. And while Nevin's getting that going, I want to also mention some of our panelists may need to leave at 6:30. This was just scheduled as an hour-long meeting, but others of us are here and will and can stay longer if there's more interest.
Do we have anybody that wants to speak to this point of whether should the county do what the report says and to preserve and improve existing housing? I'm not seeing any new hands up, but if you are interested in speaking, feel free to raise your hand or send a message to myself or the other panelists.
And I will put the next question up to stimulate that. So should the county do what the report says and align land use and plans and infrastructure investments? And I'll actually put two questions up so you can think about more things. And should we do what the report says and prioritize housing as a public and institutionally owned land? I think Mary Jane Lovely spoke very well to yes, and that there's some private land that's very important there too. But yeah, if others have things they want to comment on either of those or any of the three topics, that would be most welcome. Well, hearing none, I'll put up our final question. And this is just an invitation to share anything that you feel is important around anything we missed, got wrong, or just that you want to make a general comment about housing work within the county.
It looks like Robin wants to talk. So Robin, feel free to share.
Yeah, this is Robin Skelton. I'm the manager at Mitchell White Residences. Since we are a senior housing. You have to be 62 years old and HUD supported. I receive approximately 3 calls a week of people who are very low income and elderly that are desperate to find in housing in this area. Now, I know that since HUD took this over, that we have to be a federal project and we have to accept them anywhere in the country, but most of these people are locals that give me calls. So there is a very great demand for seniors on fixed income to find affordable housing. So that's my one comment. The other one is that some of the things that I read in this report, when I read it, for example, when Riverbend was being built, or before, they bought the land and it was mobile homes. The report says that to remove a mobile home is $10,000 to $20,000. But I talked to the previous owner and he says that he removed all 16 of the trailers there for $30,000, which is under $2,000 per mobile home to squish them up and haul them away. So if that figure is that far off, how do we accept the other estimates that you have in your report for costs that some of these things are going to take place? One more quick comment was that as I walk around the town, I see some pretty, I guess I would say, trashy places, and most of those are mobile homes. And I know a lot of this report dealt with mobile homes and how to get them repaired, but perhaps one of the things that could be put in there is how can we get the mobile home owners to clean up their sites to make the town more attractive? So those are my 3 comments that I might want to make at this time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Both on the demand side for senior housing, that is certainly a growing demographic here and everywhere. And it's something that, you know, I would love to see us address in these solutions. In terms of the Riverbend, you know, piece, there's actually quite a broad range that it can, those mobile home removals can look like, depending on if they have asbestos or other conditions. So we might just revise that. I think that's a good recommendation. We might just revise it to show more of a range. You know, we've also appreciated that there's really rapidly escalating costs. So, you know, while that was done 5-6 years ago, it's a different picture today. But I appreciate that if it doesn't resonate in the report, that does undermine our credibility. And so we'll address that. And then I think, you know, the other piece around sort of, there's often that carrot and a stick dynamic with, is your home habitable and safe, and are we doing code enforcement, and how can we help get things cleaned up if owners don't have the resources to do it themselves? So let's have those sort of carrot and stick solutions come together in improving and maintaining our housing. So thank you, that's excellent. Nevin, is there anybody else?
I do not see anybody with their hand raised. We did have a Q&A just about the number of participants, but I believe that's everybody currently. Is there anybody that is looking to share any more input on the housing strategy? If so, please either raise your hands or provide me a message. I am seeing some comments, but nobody has reached out directly looking to speak.
And wonderful, yeah, we will also be. Go ahead.
Hi, Mary Jane.
Yeah, I just wanted to make one more comment that to me is a mantra, and it sounds like this is one of your 3 main principles, but develop where development already exists and don't create sprawl. We need to use our community assets that we have, and we don't need to build things out in the out in the hinterlands, so to speak. And I don't mean it negatively. I'm just saying statistics say you should build where there are amenities and services.
We wholeheartedly agree. And when we're up against the challenges of mountain conditions, it's all that much more important. So I would say, in terms of if you have comments and you want to, if it's better for you to type them out, we will record and keep track of what's in the chat. We will accept those on the forum. They can be emailed to Sally. And we also, with regards to how many participants are, it looked like there was about 31. I don't know if you saw more than that at any point, Nevin.
Yeah, that's how many I included.
Okay, excellent. So I think with that, I would like to conclude our evening. Is there anything else that any of the other panelists would like to say in response to the comments or just in conclusion of the work tonight?
I would like to share that comments may also be provided over at the Clear Creek County Forum as well. And the full text of the housing strategy is also available on that site.
Excellent. Yes, thank you.
Well, this is Sally Rush. I'd just like to say that we have these people that have come to this meeting tonight, and we've talked to other people outside. One of the big questions, and I think one of the big hopes out of this report is, just like Jason asked, how do we get involved? And I would like to see this effort be a grassroots effort. And so if you have a burning desire to be involved and you want to be sure your name is on a list so that we can contact you when we do the next steps, or we want to reach out to someone, I would strongly recommend to please email me or go on the forum and connect through that. But to make this a grassroots effort for us to finally say, we would like to do the best we can for our housing in this county, and really put some energy in it. And just like Mary Jane said, get involved, have a passion for this. Let's protect our community so that we're pleased when we look at our community 10 years from now and say that we actually stepped up and got involved and made some improvements. So thank you.
Thank you, Sally. I think that's a wonderful note to end on. And I'm going to also make sure that the forum link is in the chat. If anyone wants to copy that before they head out. Aside from that, we hope you have a beautiful evening. Thanks all. Thanks, Nevin. I just wanted to check, did you copy the chat or shall I?
I have not copied the chat yet.
Okay. Let me see if it lets me do that easily. Shannon's on the phone, so I'm going to answer that too.
Yeah, I can do that. No problem.
Okay.
It's now saved. Yep.
Cool. Hey, Shannon.
Hey, who's this Jason guy?
I don't know. I like him.
I do too.
Yeah.